Hello guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be going over what would have happened in the Unbound if the original rocket had never failed. Now, before we get into this, I do want to go over some small factors that this might impact on. As we find out later in the Unbound Chapter 1, that the rocket ended up having the last bound inside of it. Meaning if it had never failed, it would have wiped out every single bound in a 100-mile radius. But there isn't anybody saying that the Unbound isn't farther above the horizon. Anyways, guys, so right off the bat, I wake up and we go outside to watch the rocket, which eventually ends up failing, as we know already happens in the Unbound. Now, let's say during the countdown, the rocket actually went up into space. Now, coming back down on impact, the place of detonation was originally the desert area. The desert area was at this point cut off from the society of everyone. So we can easily assume that the rocket wouldn't have hurt anybody in the main area, because on the inside of the rocket there is a bound which is sent to prevail.
Prevail.
And expand out through every single area where there could possibly be a bound in a 100-mile radius. And now, right off the bat, there's a couple of things that this will automatically affect. Most likely, the unbound mothership will most likely not arrive until later, because if there is no bound in the middle of a fight, there's nothing to broadcast. So let's say it does explode. We go on normally. There's no reason to go explore. But in this case, we were already planning on it. So we go over to desert, which we get through the door because desert was cut off until the failure of the rocket, which they opened it back up. Now, as we can see when we go into desert, this is when we encounter the first bound. This bound would have originally been dead, meaning we would not have found out that the bounds existed yet. We would have eventually left and gone home. But I can't really say with confidence what would have happened after that. But what I will say is most likely, without ever discovering the bound, we would have never found that bound for a while. So, skipping ahead into the future when the next bound does end up going, because you can tell how quick bounds are from Chapter 2, and how big their radius is for detecting any type of energy to kill them. So most likely that one bound that was outside and close enough would start making his way into that area. After arrival, we would end up finding that one bound or a different group. Whoever does, well, that would cause a big issue. The bound would probably instantly start tracking them, causing the events normally to happen. If it is that far into the future, and we assume that, the bound is dead, the original one, the second one probably wouldn't have done much that's different. Although, because of the failure of the rocket and it being years later, most likely the system for taking out the Unbounds has been shut down because they've already, quote-unquote, accomplished what they needed to. This bound probably entering the area would become very, very injured from the poison that are still lingering around. Not enough to kill him, but still enough to harm his digestive tract. Now, we do know that bounds can kill pretty quick, and their digestive tract is a bit off. But we're going to ignore that for right now. Now, pretty quick, the bound virus, which would start spreading to humans pretty quick because of the poison, would probably cause the bound to start to multiply because it would become a last resort. On multiplying, the headquarters of the unbound would start getting signals of more bounds popping up. That would turn the town into a feeding ground, causing that one bound and anybody else that he has already multiplied to contact the ship. The ship would instantly get the radio signal and start its journey to Bio S1S, which is the planet of Gorilla Tag. Moving on, because of these events, the mothership would arrive a little bit later, and there would be no space laser to attempt to take it out. Which brings us on to the events of Chapter 2. So, starting off on the events of Chapter 2, obviously, Lagoon, the main antagonist, would not be inside of the sky map. This would be taking completely different events. So we can assume that the original people who did find the new bound would be dead. Meaning this would not cause a meetup between Lagoon and Zero or anyone else. We can also go back to Chapter 1 for a second, that basically the scientist would have never happened. That end would never have happened, because the scientist would have already been long gone. Anyways, continuing. If it wasn't us as the main antagonist, there would have never been a need for a space laser. So, obviously no contact, no nothing. Meaning the mothership arrives without anybody originally knowing. Now, there's a massive mothership crossing over. There's nothing prepared, the military can't take it out. So, it lands without any damage as normal, and then it already starts lowering down to feed. As the feeding ground goes and gets bigger, there's nothing that they can really do. Nobody was expecting this, meaning there's not going to be any need to figure anything out. Assuming that there wasn't anything originally needed to be figured out. So, without the main scientists, the main characters for Chapter 2 would have been dead. So, now, all the new bounds turned Bio 106 into a feeding ground, or whatever I called it. So, that entire area is a feeding ground, and there's no longer any hope of survival. We can, at this point, think of around 200 to 300 bounds in that area, making it impossible for anybody to be able to live, even with a secret structure. Anyways, guys, that's basically what we had to go over today in the Bound series. If you guys have any questions or want me to do another part of this when we release the next chapter or anything, let me know down in the comments. And yeah, that's about it. But anyways, other than everything that we spoke about today, we just know that that is just a theory. A Lagoon Theory. I've been wanting to say that for so long.